So we're back today looking at the dev blog because there's been some pretty major additions in the last couple of days, and I really wanted to talk about them and just highlight a few key areas that I think are pretty important in the information that Wargaming is giving us. But first, I really want to appreciate what Wargaming has been doing recently. They are sticking to what they said they were going to do, at least on the little things, and that is giving us a lot more information on the upcoming changes and balancing decisions, as well as talking about their random mechanics and drop rates. We still don't quite have the actual drop rates of things. It seems like it wouldn't be too hard to just get us that information pretty quickly on some of these crates that are coming into the game, but they're working on it. There is some type of hold up, I guess, so I'm excited to see what that's going to look like in the future. It's nice to just see that they haven't forgotten about them. Now into the main part of this video that I want to talk about, and that is the balance changes coming into the game. And first of all, I really appreciate that these balancing changes are not dramatic. They are not massive changes to ships that are currently in the game. They're small tweaks trying to bump certain ships in the direction of a more balanced game. And I really appreciate that they're just not full sending it into some ridiculous balancing decision that's going to break the game in some other way. I really appreciate that they're going to take their time on this. And it shows that with at least some of these ships that they're, making small adjustments to here, it shows that they're committed to not only balancing ships that have been more recently released, but there's some old ships in here that have really needed some help that are getting a little bit of that help. Not a ton, but let's start with ZAO. Getting just a flat 2,000 HP increase, which is good. I think it could go a little higher than that for sure, considering what some of the HP pools are for some of the other tier 10 cruisers. Personally, I would have rather had the ZAO be this really low HP cruiser, but then receive a buff in a different area. I would have loved to see ZAO have maybe 30-degree turret angles. That way it can make use of its 30mm armor a little bit easier, as well as maybe buffing the torpedo arc angles, allowing you to shoot them more forwards and backwards. That way the damage output of the ZAO could be a little bit easier to get off, and you still would be that bit of a glass cannon type of ship. But at least they're moving in the right direction of a buff to the ZAO. Now looking at the FDR, of course, a ship that is broken in many, many different ways, but they're starting to address the HP pools, right? So we're getting small nerfs, realistically, to each squadron, and I think this will help, assuming that we continue to see more nerfs to the FDR. It's a little bit crazy how tanky those planes are. But on top of that, I think one of the biggest issues, for me at least, when dealing with the FDR is its ability to initiate an attack, wait for the reticle to tighten up, and then it can pretty much just turn for free without the dispersion of that drop increasing. So I think that would be an interesting thing also to see on the FDR. So we're not getting those start your torpedo run, turn 90 or more degrees, and get a perfect drop still. I think that'd be interesting as well, but good to see some nerfs coming in. And now on to ones that I don't really think are as important, but Stalingrad getting a small reload nerf is okay. I think this ship isn't really played all that much anyway. Certainly not in competitive now that the fire prevention is gone. That was a massive, massive nerf to a lot of these super cruisers. So I'm not sure about the Stalingrad getting this nerf on top of its radar being reduced to 25 seconds only. I don't know. It's just a ship that I haven't really been all that interested in playing, especially since the fire prevention nerf, where you can't actually reduce the number of fires on your ship. So that's a little bit of a rough one. To see Petro only receive a 0.5 second nerf to its reload doesn't really grasp or deal with some of the biggest issues with Petro, which definitely involves its ridiculous pen levels, its improved pen angles, as well as the ship being ridiculously stealthy and having that insanely low profile in the water, making it very, very difficult to hit, even if it is spotted, which a lot of the time it can just go dark for free because it has such good concealment. It's very difficult to spot a Petro because the difference between its detection range and its radar range is so thin that DD players can't just sit in that little gap, keeping a ship lit and then getting it killed with your teammates. So I would love to see probably a concealment nerf to the Petro. I think that would be the biggest thing, and maybe a nerf to the pen of the Petro. Maybe the pen angles as well. Make it more like Moskva guns. Maybe that would be a way to do things, but then I guess we're just getting towards Moskva. I do think Moskva is a much better balanced ship than Petro, so that's maybe why I'm leaning towards that. Kotovsky, I'm not too interested in the low tiers. Sorry, I don't really know. I don't play that side of the game all that often, so I guess it needed a small buff. Seeing Buffalo get a buff is nice. It's kind of an odd thing to go to the Buffalo, where you had 9 guns on the Baltimore with I believe a 10-second reload, and then you go to the Buffalo with 12 guns, an 11.5-second reload, and then Des Moines gets the 9 guns again with like 6 or 5.5. So kind of an odd jump in the line, but it's nice to see it getting a bit of DPM. Synop getting nerfed. I think these are all good little changes. For the most part, they are going in the directions that I would say they need to with a lot of these ships, being that Synop is a little bit overperforming, Buffalo underperforming, that kind of thing. They're doing a good job here. And ships like Yu Yang, I think, I wish they would just remove the radar from it and just give it its old reloads back. This ship was so much fun to play before they nerfed it so badly because of that radar, or just give it its old values back. We have so many radar destroyers in the game at this point that are going to be taken over a Yu Yang. Ships like Smolensk or Ragnar, they're really just better versions of that original Yu Yang radar ship. So I'd love to see these reloads come back to more gearing levels, right? If we could get gearing torp reload and gearing gun reload back on the Yu Yang, I think that would be really, really fun. Seeing Marco Polo get a small Sigma buff is also very nice to see. That was one of the biggest issues, is it was in testing, and I played it during the Deadeye era, and it always felt kind of bad after they removed Deadeye. So I guess maybe I got used to a ship that was a little bit better than they were intending to release. I'm not sure, but unfortunate that the Italian battleships were tested and balanced within the Deadeye world. So now they feel a little bit inaccurate. So it's nice to see the Marco Polo at least getting that little bit of a buff. And we're seeing a small buff to the Monarch as well with range, and that's nice to see. Monarch is a bit of a weird one in that grind for sure, and a few bug fixes. Really, really good to see. It's very nice to know that they are looking into the balance of the game, and they're trying to make changes, and they're not making drastic changes that are going to upset the reasonable, I guess I'll say, balance of the game that we have currently. It's nice to know that they're not going to just make sweeping changes without really thoroughly testing them first. So very, very good to see. I like this direction Wargaming's heading in with balance changes. Now on to Submarines and some of the feedback that Wargaming is giving us over what they're seeing with Submarines. The important thing to know is that you're going to have 2 types of torpedoes in the future with Submarines, at least with this test upcoming. So they're going to split the double ping mechanic. So if you want your torpedoes to home, they will no longer ignore torpedo protection and citadel. That's the important change here. So homing torps will still be in the game, unfortunately, but they aren't going to be this massive, massive alpha damage with that double ping. They're changing it so the other set of torpedoes will retain that ability for that massive alpha strike, ignoring torpedo protection and citadeling you with a double ping, but those will no longer home. So that's the difference here. Homing torpedoes that do less damage, and normal torpedoes that do a ton of damage when you get those pings. I think this is a good change. It shows that they're looking to address some of the issues with submarines, which was that incredible power and almost unfair levels of damage when you get double pinged and you've used your damage con on a triple fire or someone else's torps or something along those lines. It felt a little bit unfair to play against, I'll be honest. So it's nice to see them changing that. Personally, if I have a prediction, the torpedoes with the huge alpha damage just won't get used. The homing is just too powerful. The ability to stack floods, stack dots on people with the normal torpedoes is just too much to ignore. And the ability to just always have the torpedoes homing in on a target, meaning it's very hard to miss a lot of these bigger targets. I don't think we're going to see the Alpha Strike torpedoes at all. I think we're still just going to see pings and homing torpedoes. And let's be honest, the damage that the torpedoes do on their own, even without getting a double ping, is actually pretty substantial. I've dev struck many a cruiser by hitting 6 torpedoes, right? And that sounds like, wow, you hit 6 torpedoes. But when they're homing, it's not hard to hit 6 torpedoes, right? So that's enough to dev strike most cruisers, any destroyer, right? So kind of odd that they're keeping the homing mechanic. I really think it's a bad game design that just leads to people not wanting to play the game, or just, you know, sitting at the back of the map and not interested in pushing in at all. Now, a good change is that submarine spotting underwater is getting nerfed, so it's looking like it's more of a proxy spotting system with 2-kilometer spotting when a submarine is underwater. The thing that worries me is that the hydrophone or hydroacoustic, whatever the subs version of that is still going to spot at, you know, below water, right? You're still going to be able to see those slow pings of ships underneath the water. And I've used that many times to get the position and bearing of a surface ship that's a few kilometers away from my sub underwater, and then I send a ping where I think he's going to go. And then that ping keeps updating for the next 25 seconds, 30 seconds, giving me an up-to-date location of what that ship is doing. It then allows me to maybe pop up as they make a turn and launch a ton of torpedoes just directly in their face and they can't dodge it. Or that little bit of last known location updating is giving my team a massive advantage. I just think that the pings and the ability to spot all of these things underwater and update the last known position when you do get a ping, it's just a little bit too strong. It's just too much information. So I would love to see a change to the way the map is updated when you get a ping, so that it's not a global thing, that your teammates are getting an update on last known positions, that kind of thing. I just think that the ability for a sub to do all that recon from below the water undetected is a little bit too powerful. And part of that comes down to the survivability. Submarines are difficult to kill. In my opinion, they are one of the most survivable classes in the entire game, just because they have so much battery charge to stay underwater, and of course, at maximum depth, you can't spot them even with a surface ship's hydroacoustic search. I think that's just gotta change. The amount of battery is so large that it's incredibly easy and simple to manage that and stay underwater for the vast majority of the game where you're potentially in trouble. It's just too strong to be able to go immune, essentially, unspotted whenever you want to. That's just too strong. No other ship in the game can do that. Not even a carrier can do that. When they get spotted and they're caught, they're going to stay caught, and you're going to be able to do damage to them. If you catch a submarine, they just dive, and assuming they have a lot of battery charge left, they're not going to be spotted, and they're going to stay at maximum depth, unless you have a submarine that can also go to that depth and then initiate a fight in those kind of environments. It's just too strong to be able to push the C key a couple times and become immune to damage and spotting. It's just too strong. Interestingly here, moving on, that submarine popularity is actually higher than they anticipated. 10% of games at tier 10 are played on submarines. That's quite a lot, and they were looking for that 4 to 8%, which means nerfs are in order, and that is good to see, but it's a little unfortunate that the balance of the ship is not determined by what is best for the game, but what is best for a class's popularity and its pick rate. I think it should be a scenario where you're looking to balance something so that it's fun for people to play and play against, and because it's fun to play and play against, people are just going to end up playing it. You shouldn't be artificially trying to get people to play something based on its power level. I think that's backwards, or you just have the wrong priorities looking into balancing a ship at that point. I don't agree with that at all. And I think that's one of the reasons that aircraft carriers are in the state they are. And adding a submarine and balancing it in a similar way is just going to have a bad impact on the game, and it doesn't actually drive innovation and drive the developers to find a way to implement something in the game so that it's fun for everyone and then it gets played. Instead, it's, okay, well, we need to tune it to be just powerful enough that we get enough people who want to cheese everyone else and use the somewhat overpowered ship to get the play rate up. I think that's just such a weird way to balance a game. Your game should be trying to be fun to play, fundamentally, right? Maybe not completely, because you do want to force people to try to spend money on the game. There are elements of frustration that have to be in these games, because how else are you going to get people to buy premium? How else are you going to get people to buy premium ships? I think the mentality is that people want to spend money on a game they like, but that's not really what actually happens behind the scenes, I don't think. I think people spend money because they're frustrated that a higher tier ship just killed them and they didn't feel like they could do much, so then they spend money to get that ship, and then that just keeps going. I think that is the money-making train, and unfortunately I think that's the way this game is going to continue. And now on to moving forward, we're continuing with some more disappointing news. That in 10.10, submarines are still going to be there in testing in random battles. So we're not even going to get a reprieve of a single patch from having subs at this point. So as much as this is a test and rentals, it doesn't really feel like it when the next patch and the next patch is just going to continue having submarine testing. So I wish that the subs would go back to the drawing board a little bit more and we get a break and actually be able to enjoy matches without the submarines having to take up those spots and making the games feel empty. I know for me personally, I've felt like the matches that I've been in with submarines have felt rather empty, where we have scenarios where there's 2 submarines and 4 or 5 destroyers and maybe an aircraft carrier. That adds up to like 7 ships that's entire goal is to play out of stealth and not get spotted. So suddenly these big giant maps become very, very empty. And to play a large capital ship in that, where everybody's trying to kill you from stealth, it's not very enjoyable at all. So I'm really disappointed to see that 10.10 is going to continue having submarines, and that even with all of these changes and things that Wargaming wants to do, that they're going to continue testing the current iteration of subs. It seems like a missed opportunity to pull them for the next couple weeks until 10.10 and then do the new changes, giving players a break from having subs and actually being able to enjoy the matches a little bit more without this new testing class in the game, of which most matches include them nowadays, which is really disappointing. Really, really disappointing. It just feels like they're trying to force this onto people, and then maybe like the whole how do you boil a frog type of analogy where you put them in cold water and just slowly turn up the temperature and they won't notice. It feels a little bit like that, where they're trying to force subs in, and the longer they have these quote-unquote testing times and they're making changes, the more people are just going to get used to them into their games, and then they'll just be, oh, whatever, I guess I'm resigned. I'm resigned to the fact that they're in the game. It's fine, you know, they'll do whatever they're going to do. I'll enjoy it. It's okay. That's really disappointing that that seems to be what they're trying to do, and it just is making the game worse. It's sad to see for me, because I really do enjoy the core game. When I picked the game up 6 years ago, I really, really liked the playstyle of surface-to-surface ship combat. Seems like we're going away from that, though, unfortunately. Now onto the last thing I want to talk about here is we're looking at changes to some of the test ships, and that includes some of these super ships. And we did notice that the Annapolis was just worse when you used its burst firing mode. So they actually buffed it to give it 3 salvos instead of 2. So now it looks a lot like the Conde or Conde. I'm not French. I don't know how to pronounce that. But whatever the French. Henri 5. Let's call it a Henri 5. That's easier for me. It looks much like that, where we're getting the nerf to dispersion, but the huge amount of burst out of it. But again, because the Annapolis has such a fast fire rate, you lose so much DPM, even with the 3 salvos. I'm not sure it's going to be all that worth it. It's going to be a bit of a niche thing where you're probably still just going to want to use normal fire. which is a little too bad since the gimmick is the salvo firing, but it is a buff, so it'll be a little bit more useful. That is a huge dispersion difference, though. Let's just be very clear. And now on to the Henri 5. We actually get a massive nerf to the alternative firing, where we actually have a worse reload, less salvos. We only get 2 instead of 3 salvos, and we're getting the bit of the Annapolis trend where we actually get improved dispersion by a little bit, but I don't know if that reload is going to be worth the 2 salvos with a 50-second reload. Sorry, it's not 40, it's 50 seconds. So you get 2 salvos, 50 seconds, and your bonus is 40% accuracy. I don't think people are going to want to use that all that much. I think it's just going to be much better to use the normal firing rate. And yes, I do think this ship was a little bit overtuned, and it was because of that, it was incredibly fun to play. But I just think these super ships and their gimmicks aren't going to be very healthy for the game if they're added into random battles. And I know what you're saying, oh, they're just going to go into ranked, it's okay. Well, Submarines were just going into ranked, and now they're in random. So I'm pretty sure this is eventually coming down the pipe to random battles. And that's sad to see, because you imagine being a tier 9 ship fighting these? Just get your Rune or your Buffalo like we talked about earlier. You're fighting these things? I don't know. Seems a little bit strange. Interestingly, in the alternative firing mode, you get 25% HE pen and 10% AP shell damage. So you're going to have a massive reload, but you do get some nice bonuses to your shell damage abilities in that mode. So we'll have to test it out and see on the PTS whenever that happens. Now the changes to the other ships, super ships, don't seem all that interesting to me at the moment, but you can go ahead and read them if you would like to, but I'm not going to go over them here. They just seem kind of like small little changes here and there. Now a very interesting ship I do want to talk about is the Tier 9 Italian battleship that is basically a Marco Polo without sap in its main guns, but you get sap secondaries like Napoli does. So, and you get a smoke screen. So I think this is just power creep for the poor Marco Polo. It's good to see the Marco Polo getting that Sigma increase, and I guess this one getting a Sigma decrease. But let's be honest, the Italian smoke and having sap secondaries is just going to be too much to... too many good things for this ship to even think about really choosing the Marco Polo. I think the 406 sap is interesting, but I don't think even with 1.9 Sigma it's going to be accurate enough to deal with the massive power that's going to come from these sap secondaries and that smokescreen. The smokescreen is a huge tool for Italian battleships, and it's really sad the Marco Polo doesn't have that one. So that's been the most recent development blog. That's really all I wanted to talk about, just some of the upcoming changes. There's a lot of good here. I know I was pretty negative once we got into it and really looked at a lot of stuff, but I really do appreciate Wargaming giving us all this information to balancing decisions, actually making some balancing decisions, because in the past there's been some long stretches where we haven't had any balance changes to the game. So it's nice to see Wargaming putting an effort into maintaining the game that they already have and not just focusing on the new stuff. I am disappointed about Submarines and their constant testing, even continuing into 10.10. I really don't enjoy having them in the game, and I wish that I did. I wish that the playstyle that Wargaming came up with, the game design, was fun. And I don't think it's all that fun for especially the people getting pinged. They really didn't address the issue of an overused damage control that the constant pinging and homing torpedoes are going to just absolutely mess with, and that people are going to be forced away all the time. The reload on a lot of these torpedoes is so low that you're reloading multiple sets of torpedoes in the time it takes for a single damage control to reload for a lot of these ships you're fighting. So it seems a little bit strange that the changes they're making are so minor and that they're just continuing to leave them in as they are, even though they're going to make changes. I don't know. I'm just sad about the addition of submarines, much like I was sad about the changes to CVs, or even CVs being in this game at all. The original design of surface ship to surface ship combat is really why I enjoy this game, and It's unfortunate to see Wargaming continuing down the trend of adding more ships that don't want to operate on the surface and don't want to operate in ways that normal surface ships can both deal with and be killed by in ways that feel fair, right? It feels fair when I get caught broadside by a Shimakaze volley of torpedoes and get dev struck because, well, my positioning was wrong, and I probably could have turned or varied up my throttle or anything like that to avoid the majority of that damage. When a submarine is constantly pinging me every 8 to 10 seconds and sending 4 or 5 torpedoes every 40 to 50 seconds, and my damage control is an 80-second cooldown, and those torps, well, they're not doing citadel damage and dev striking me. They're constantly hitting me and flooding me and hitting me for huge amounts of damage. I wish that Wargaming would reconsider this game design of submarines and take it back to the drawing board and really just try again. I think that's what I would like to see happen, but I don't think that's really going to happen because there's too much time and money invested in this design at this point, and, well, everybody is susceptible to that sunk cost fallacy, and that's unfortunate. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and let me know what you think of these dev blogs and the changes that are upcoming into the game. I'd be curious to hear mainly on submarines, but a little bit on the balance changes as well. I think that's probably the highlight of all these dev blogs, is the reasonable, managed balance changes that aren't going to really upset the game, but moving it in the right direction. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.